Hello and welcome to another video, and today I'm going to give you 5 key things which you should be doing as a teenager looking to build muscle. In fact, even if you're not a teenager, these things apply to anyone who's new to the gym and in some cases even more experienced lifters. So if you currently look a little bit like this and you'd like to progress to looking something more like this, but ideally you want to avoid looking like this, then I'm going to ask for 2 small things in return. Firstly, you drop this video a like, and secondly, you subscribe if you've not already. Right, probably just start the video now. Okay, we're in. Now before I start, the person I used in the thumbnail and in those clips I just showed you there is my younger brother Ben. The reason I used him is that he has made the majority of his progress, most of his transformation as a teenager, right? So he fits this mold perfectly in that he has built a lot of muscle as a teenager. On top of that, we've been training together for like over 4 years now, and all of the principles I'm going to be talking to you about today are things that we've applied to him, and they've obviously worked very well. You can see, like when we first started training together, he was, I think he was kind of 15, 16. He's obviously very skinny. Like, bear in mind, he's 6'3". He's naturally, like I said, a very skinny, very lanky kind of guy. He would fit that kind of hard gainer bracket, I guess. So yeah, basically it's much harder for him to build muscle on that frame than some other people. So it's even more impressive that he's now looking like more like this. He's basically put on a significant amount of weight, a significant amount of muscle. And like I said, he's been using the principles that I'm going to be talking to you about today. Now, before I get onto my 5 tips, I want to quickly highlight something that's really important you are aware of, and you kind of keep in the back of your mind the whole time you're in this phase, right? And that is that when you are a teenager, you are a beginner, right? I'm assuming unless you started really early, you're in the first 1 to 2 years of your lifting career, right? Now, this is called the newbie phase, and in this phase, you can make ridiculous progress, right? You have the potential to build more muscle and more strength in these couple of years than you will at any other point in your life, okay? Unless you like start taking drugs, right? Now, that's amazing, that's an incredible time, it's really enjoyable, but at the same time, it can be very misleading, okay? Because what it can do is it can kind of give you a false impression of your training and your program, because basically you can make progress under almost any circumstances. So you can actually be following a really crappy program, but because you're making some progress, you think, oh, my program's brilliant, right? So basically you're making progress, you're building muscle, you're getting stronger in spite of your training program rather than because of it, okay? So, you know, ultimately you're making some progress, but you could be making a lot more. And that leads me on nicely to tip number 1, which is that you should be running a structured, solid, consistent training program. Now, your training program, although there are probably some more important factors, that's gonna underpin everything, right? Because teenagers in particular have a tendency, in my experience, to kind of rock up at the gym and just do whatever, right? They'll go with their friends, they'll go quite sporadically, and they'll just do whatever they feel like on the day, or they'll do whatever their mates are doing, right? Now, this can lead to the, you know, to the odd, random, awesome session, but if you zoom out and you look at the bigger picture, there's going to be no continuity there. There's going to be no moderation in terms of how often you're hitting an exercise or how often you're hitting a body part, and your volume's going to be all over the place. And what that means is that ultimately you're not going to make anywhere near the progress you could if you were on a more structured plan. Now, I would recommend doing a push-pull leg split. Firstly, because it's kind of, you know, really, really simple, and secondly, because it kind of hits everything you need to hit, and it gives you a nice fluid plan. So basically, push, pull, legs. Push is going to be any pushing movements, right? So like chest, shoulders, triceps. Pull is going to be any pulling movements, so ultimately back and biceps, and then legs is going to be legs, right? Now, one thing I'll do within that is I would do, even though your rear delts, so the back of your shoulders, so any kind of like reverse flies or like face pulls, even though those movements are going to be hitting rear delts, which are technically shoulders, I would move those into your back day because it makes more sense in terms of managing volume and recovery. But yeah, that'll be a brilliant place to start. If you are a beginner, if you've never trained before, I would recommend doing that cycle once a week. So every week you train 3 times, you do push, then you do pull, then you do legs. The following week you repeat it, and that gives you a really, really solid base, a really good foundation from which you can then build moving forward. Tip number 2 is to be conservative and patient with your volume and frequency. Now, what I mean here is basically don't do too much too soon, okay? Now, this kind of almost contradicts what I talked about earlier, and it's kind of ironic because you can get kind of 2 polar opposites. You get teenagers who go to the gym and, like I said, just do kind of whatever. They're really sporadic. They just train, you know, really infrequently. They have no kind of plan at all, and they don't make enough progress, or they don't make as much progress as they could make. Then the opposite to that is you get teenagers who get kind of really obsessed, and they get a really kind of advanced training plan, and they make loads of progress really early on. But because they're doing a training program that's almost, you know, it's too much. It's kind of more geared to an intermediate to advanced lifter. Then after they've adapted to that, like, where do they go from there? Because they're already already, you know, training at a really high level and they're only like 17, 18. So what you want to do is just find kind of somewhere in the middle, right? Find, like I said, a structured, solid plan, but just build it up really, really slowly. So like I said, a push-pull leg split 3 days a week will be a great place to start. Like, I've seen guys who have never gone to the gym before and they go straight into training 5 days a week. Now, the issue here is that, you know, they'll make progress, they'll make really fast progress because they put in, you know, they're subjecting their body to all of this volume, all of this stimulus. It's going to adapt, it's going to get strong and it's going to get big really quickly. But the problem then, like I said, is that after 6 months or a year, you have adapted to 5 days a week. You then got to try and increase that in some way. And because you're only young, like, you know, there's only so much, there's only so many days, there's only so many hours you can spend in the gym each week. And if you're already getting towards that upper limit and you're only 17, 18, like, how are you possibly going to progress in the long term? You know, I've said this so many times, it's basically becoming like my catchphrase, but you want to make progress on the least amount of volume possible. What that means is you want to find the amount of volume that allows you to make progress and just do that, okay? And when that is no longer enough to make progress, then you can increase it slightly. But don't go from here to here, you know, in one jump, because that makes no sense. And like I said, all you're doing there is you're shooting yourself in the foot, because further down the line you're going to come unstuck. Tip number 3, and this is such a big one, and that is don't try to get shredded, right? I cannot stress this enough. This is one of the biggest mistakes that teenagers and beginners make, right? I see it all the time. I've had so many prospective clients come to me in the past who are like, you know, 17, 18, 19 years old, and they're super skinny, or they, you know, they're almost skinny fat, and they're telling me they want to get shredded, they want to get a 6-pack like for the summer. Right now, the problem here is that that is such a short-term goal, right? It's such a short-sighted like vision. I'm not looking beyond the next couple of months at all, and it's a terrible way to approach your training, right? For 2 reasons. Firstly, because if you haven't got any muscle, like, why are you trying to get shredded? What are you trying? The point of getting lean, right, of losing body fat, is to reveal like the muscle mass, you know, the physique you have under that fat. If you haven't built any muscle, what are you trying to reveal? Like your friggin' skeleton. It makes no sense. And secondly, and even more importantly, is what I just spoke about, is that when you are a beginner, when you are a teenager, you are in that newbie, that incredible phase of potentially making a huge amount of progress. If you are in a calorie deficit, if you are cutting, if you're trying to get lean, you are going to massively restrict the amount of progress you can make, and that window only occurs once, right? You only get that chance, that first couple of years, you only get that once in your whole life. Why would you drastically reduce the amount of progress you can make by, you know, having that short-sighted view of wanting to get shredded? Now, the only exception, the only disclaimer here is obviously, you know, if you're really fat, like if you're really fat, if you're kind of obese, morbidly obese as a teenager, as a beginner, then of course you want to stay in a calorie deficit, you want to lose fat, of course. But if you are, you know, just the average person who hasn't built, you know, any muscle at all really, and you're looking to get a 6-pack, you are going about it the wrong way. You're gonna have to suck it up, spend a few years, you know, at maintenance or in a bit of a surplus. I would recommend gaining somewhere in the region of ½ pound a week, no more than that, because that's just going to lead to fat gain. Yeah, stay in that maintenance or in a slight surplus for a good period of time. Ride out that newbie phase, make as much progress, really maximize the progress you can make in that phase. And when you've done that and you've built a good amount of strength, a good amount of muscle and a good foundation, then and only then you can think about maybe cutting down and looking to get shredded. Tip number 4 is that your form has to come before the weight, okay? So you need to get your technique perfect before you even consider increasing the resistance. Now, this is important for anyone that goes to the gym, but particularly for beginners and teenagers, it's absolutely crucial, it's fundamental. And that is because, well, for a number of reasons, right? Firstly, because when you're a teenager, you are growing naturally, right? That's just a thing that happens to you, right? You could just sit in a room and watch TV and do nothing, and you will get bigger, you will build muscle because your body is growing, right? Training should supplement that. Your training should run alongside that nicely and encourage that growth, and obviously, you know, add even more. Now, the problem is that if you're lifting with poor form and you're lifting a lot of weight with poor form, you are gonna, you're more susceptible to injury, right? On top of that, that's gonna lead to kind of biomechanical issues that are gonna be very hard to undo, okay? So those issues are, firstly, they're gonna inhibit your natural growth, right? Because you're doing things to your body that you shouldn't be doing. You're putting it under unnecessary stress in kind of, you know, compromising positions. But arguably even more important than that is that you're setting yourself up for the next 10 years, right? How many videos do you see on YouTube that are like, things that I wish I knew when I first started training? Well, I've made that video myself, because everyone makes mistakes when they first start training. That's normal, right? But if you keep making those same mistakes, then what you're doing is you're embedding that kind of muscle memory, you're embedding that central nervous system development. You know, your body is getting used to doing a certain thing. So for example, if you are bench pressing with horrible flared elbows, if you do that, like I did that for the first 2 or 3 years of my lifting career, and it took me a good 2 years to get out of that habit. It took me a good 2 years to learn to retract contract my scapula and properly engage my chest. So if you're doing those things, if you're lifting with that horrible technique and crucially you're putting loads of weight on at the same time, then like I said, you're going to inhibit your development, you're going to massively limit the amount of progress you can make, and on top of that, you're going to set yourself up for, you know, years and years of a friggin' ball ache trying to undo all those mistakes that you did when you first started training. And that leads me on nicely to my fifth and final tip, and that is to have realistic expectations. Now this is so key, and it's one of the reasons that, you know, people get disheartened and sometimes just stop training altogether, and that is that they set themselves ridiculous goals. Okay, they see people on Instagram who are friggin' massive and they say, right, you know, I'm a 7 stone 16-year-old, I'm gonna train in 6 months time, I'm gonna look like that guy, right? That is, you know, obviously completely ridiculous, it's completely unrealistic, and it's really important that you are aware of what is realistic and what is not realistic when you start training, because what happens is if you set yourself, you know, absurd goals in terms of building muscle, in terms of building strength, when you inevitably don't reach those goals, you're going to become disheartened and you're either just going to not enjoy training anymore, or even worse, you're going to sack it off altogether. So what I would suggest is you set yourself small, relatively short, realistic goals, okay? So in terms of building muscle, like, you got to remember that's very subjective. Yeah, obviously you are, you know, it's a physical thing that's taking place, but it's very hard to measure it because you look at yourself in the mirror and you can get all kinds of, you know, weird perceptions and complexes. So what I would do, just to try and add as much, you know, make it as objective as you possibly can, is just weigh yourself all the time, right? Now, like I said earlier about being in a slight calorie surplus, just try and gain a small amount of weight each week. If you are doing that, and in the gym your lifts are going up, your numbers are going up, your technique is good, you can feel that you are engaging, contracting the correct muscles, then I can almost guarantee you that you're going to be building muscle alongside that. And then just set yourself targets in terms of yourself. Just compare yourself to yourself. There is no point looking at someone else, even one of your friends, and saying, right, I'm going to try and beat him, or I'm going to try and look better than him, because even though, you know, on the one hand, of course, that's a good thing, you want to be competitive, that kind of makes things more exciting and more fun, you need to bear in mind that everyone has different genetics, everyone has different potential and capabilities in terms of building muscle and in terms of building strength. So if you base your goals on someone else, then you are ultimately setting yourself up to fail. Now, not only could you be setting yourself unrealistic goals in terms of your friend has got a better genetics, so you're trying to beat him and it's never going to happen, it can actually even go the other way. You know, if you're looking at your friend and you have far superior genetics to him, and you say, right, I'm going to try and be bigger than him in 6 months, you might get bigger than him in a month, and because you've already beaten him, you get complacent, you don't try, you don't try as hard as you could. So just try and, it sounds corny, the only person you've got to beat is yourself, right? If over the period of months you look at yourself and you are getting bigger, you are getting stronger, you've achieved your goal, you are making progress, that is all that matters. And just remember, again, one final time, it is a long game. I know it's so easy to say be patient, and being patient sucks. Like, I am so impatient myself, but ultimately, if you're going to be lifting for the next 10, 20 years, you don't need to make a stupid amount of progress right now. Just set yourself up for the next 10 years of your lifting career, and like I said, you will be grateful that you did that, in 5-10 years time. And that is where I'm going to end the video, because firstly, I just am, and secondly, I feel I need to seek some kind of counselling in order to address the psychological scars I've obtained as a result of spending way too long on a Google video search watching videos like this one in an attempt to make you laugh. So I sincerely hope you enjoyed it, guys. If you have enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. Like I said at the start, please subscribe to my channel if you've not already. Feel free to share this video. Maybe you have like a friend who is so unbelievably skinny and pathetic that you're embarrassed to be seen out with him. I mean, if that's your viewpoint, you're a horrible person, but yeah, share this video with them because maybe it's going to help them out. And I will see you tomorrow.